Hey everyone, I'm Margaret and I'm 58 years old. I need to tell you about something that happened to me that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. But before I get into the crazy part, let me just say, what happened after my daughter's funeral will make your blood boil. And what I did about it? Well, you'll have to stick around to see if I went too far. I've been a widow for 12 years now. My husband died when our daughter Khloe was just 16. Cancer took him in 6 brutal months. And suddenly, I was a single mom trying to hold everything together. Khloe was my whole world after that. Smart as a whip, beautiful inside and out, and the only family I had left. For 12 years, it was just us two against the world. I worked double shifts at the hospital where I'm a nurse, just to make sure she could go to college without debt. I gave up dating, gave up my own dreams of traveling, gave up everything so that girl could have the best life possible. And you know what? I was happy to do it. That's what mothers do, right? When Khloe turned 25, she met Kevin at her marketing job. Now, I want to be fair here because, well, you'll see why in a minute. Kevin seemed nice enough at first. Polite, had a decent job in sales, made Khloe laugh. But there was something about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Maybe it was how his smile never quite reached his eyes, or how he always seemed to be calculating something behind that charming facade. But Khloe was head over heels, and who was I to stand in the way of her happiness? After everything she'd been through losing her dad so young, she deserved to be loved. They got married 2 years later, in a beautiful ceremony that I paid for, by the way. $28,000 that wiped out most of my savings, but seeing my baby girl walk down that aisle, it was worth every penny. Kevin's family contributed exactly nothing, but they sure enjoyed the open bar and the prime rib dinner. Here's where things get complicated, and I need you to pay attention because this becomes important later. Trust me on this. When Khloe and Kevin started talking about buying a house, they were struggling to get approved for a mortgage. Kevin's credit was, let's call it problematic. Multiple missed payments, a repossessed car from his college days, the works. And Khloe, bless her heart, had great credit, but not enough employment history to qualify for the amount they needed. So I made a decision that I thought was helping my daughter build her future. I put the house in my name and let them live there, with the understanding that they'd pay the mortgage and eventually we'd transfer it to them once Kevin's credit improved. I put down $40,000 from my retirement fund for the down payment. $40,000, you guys. That was everything I had saved for my own future. The house was beautiful, a 4-bedroom colonial in a great neighborhood with good schools for the grandchildren I hoped they'd give me someday. Khloe was over the moon, and Kevin seemed grateful at the time. He even gave me a hug and called me the best mother-in-law in the world. What a joke that turned out to be. For the first year, everything seemed fine. They paid the mortgage on time, Khloe would call me every few days, and Kevin was pleasant enough when I came over for Sunday dinners. But slowly, things started to change. It began with little comments. Kevin would make jokes about how I was getting older and should think about downsizing my life. He'd mention retirement communities he'd seen advertised, always with this fake concerned tone, like he was just looking out for me. When I'd visit, he'd make comments about how I should probably call first next time, since they were building their own family now. Khloe started calling less. When I asked her about it, she'd say they were just busy with work and fixing up the house. But there was something in her voice, a tiredness that worried me. When I'd suggest lunch dates or shopping trips, she always seemed to have an excuse. The Sunday dinners stopped altogether about 6 months before everything fell apart. Kevin said they needed their weekends to themselves, to focus on their marriage. I understood. I really did. Newlyweds need their space, but it hurt, you know? After years of it being just me and Khloe, suddenly, I felt like I was on the outside looking in, but I kept telling myself this was normal, this was healthy. She was building her own life, and I needed to let her. Then Khloe got sick. It started with headaches. Bad ones that would leave her curled up in bed for hours. Then came the nausea, the dizziness, the fatigue that no amount of sleep could fix. For months, Kevin convinced her it was just stress from work, just hormones, just anything other than something serious. I begged her to see a doctor. Every phone call, every text, I'd ask if she'd made an appointment yet. Kevin would get on the phone sometimes and assure me he was taking good care of her, that she just needed rest. By the time she finally went to the doctor, it was too late. Stage 4, brain cancer, glioblastoma, the most aggressive kind. The oncologist gave her 6 months to a year with treatment, maybe less without it. I will never forget the phone call when she told me. I was at work, just finishing up with a patient when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer because I was running behind, but something made me pick up. "Mom?" Her voice was so small, so scared. "I need you to come to the hospital. I need you, right now." I dropped everything and drove like a maniac to get to her. When I walked into that sterile room and saw my baby girl sitting on the examination table with tears streaming down her face, my whole world collapsed. But you know what the worst part was? Kevin was there, but he was on his phone, while our daughter was getting the worst news of her life. When I asked him to put it away, he said it was an important work call that couldn't wait. That's when I should have known. That's when I should have seen what kind of man he really was. The next 11 months were pure hell. Chemo, radiation, surgery, more chemo. I took family leave from work to be with her through every appointment, every treatment, every terrifying night when the pain was so bad she couldn't sleep. Kevin kept working. He said someone had to maintain their lifestyle, had to keep the insurance going, which would have been reasonable, except he also kept going out with his buddies, kept playing golf on weekends, kept living his life like nothing had changed. I moved into the guest room of the house that was still in my name, remember, to help take care of Khloe full time. Kevin wasn't happy about it, but what could he say? His wife was dying, and she needed care he wasn't providing. Those months watching my daughter fight for her life were the hardest of my existence. But they were also precious in a way I can't explain. We talked about everything, her childhood, her dreams, her regrets. She told me how grateful she was for all the sacrifices I'd made for her over the years. She also told me things about Kevin that made my heart break, how he'd started staying out later and later, how he'd snap at her when she was too sick to do household chores, how he'd mentioned more than once that he was too young to be a widower and that this wasn't what he'd signed up for. But she made me promise not to confront him. She was dying, and she didn't want her last months to be filled with family drama. So I bit my tongue and focused on making her as comfortable as possible. In her final weeks, when she was mostly bedridden, Kevin became even more distant. He'd come home from work, grab a beer, and disappear into his man cave to watch TV or play video games. I was the one giving her medications, helping her to the bathroom, holding her hand when the pain got too bad. I was the one who held her when she took her last breath on a Tuesday morning in March. Kevin was at work. He said he couldn't take any more time off, that his boss was getting impatient with all his absences. Our daughter died, and he was worried about his job performance review. The funeral was 3 days later. I handled all the arrangements because Kevin said he was too devastated to think clearly. I picked out her casket, wrote her obituary, chose the flowers, coordinated with the church. I spent another $8,000 of my dwindling savings to give my daughter the beautiful send-off she deserved. Kevin's contribution was showing up in a black suit and accepting condolences like he was the grieving widower of the year. The service was beautiful. Khloe's friends from college came, my co-workers, neighbors, even some of her old teachers. Everyone talked about what a bright light she'd been, how much she touched their lives. Kevin stood next to me at the receiving line, playing the part. Perfectly. But I noticed things. I noticed how his grief seemed performative, like he was acting a role. I noticed how he kept checking his phone, even during the eulogy. I noticed how quickly he perked up when people started talking about moving forward and new beginnings. After the burial, people came back to the house for food and to share memories. My sister had driven in from out of state, and some of Khloe's closest friends were there. It should have been a time for comfort, for coming together in our shared loss. Instead, it became the moment that changed everything. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up plates and trying to keep busy so I wouldn't fall apart, when Kevin walked in. Most of the guests had left by then, and the house was finally quiet. "We need to talk," he said, and something in his tone made me look up from the dishes I was washing. "Of course," I said. "I know this is hard for both of us, but we'll get through." "No," he cut me off. "You don't understand. We need to talk about you moving out." I actually laughed. I thought he was joking, or maybe the grief was making him say things he didn't mean. "Moving out? Kevin, I live here. I've been living here for almost a year, taking care of Khloe." "Yeah, well, Khloe's gone now." His words hit me like a physical blow. The casual way he said it, like she was just some problem that had been solved. And I need my space to grieve and move on with my life. Move on? I couldn't keep the shock out of my voice. "Kevin, we just buried her today. Today." He shrugged. Actually shrugged. "Life goes on, Margaret. I'm young. I have my whole future ahead of me. I can't have my dead wife's mother hanging around and making everything awkward." I set down the dish I was holding very carefully because my hands were starting to shake, making everything awkward. "I just spent the last year caring for your wife while you played golf and went out with your friends. I held her hand while she died because you couldn't be bothered to take time off work." "That's not fair," he said, but there was no real conviction in it. I was dealing with it in my own way. "Your own way?" I turned to face him fully. "Your own way was to check out completely and let me handle everything?" "Look," he said, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "I didn't ask for any of this, okay? I married Khloe for better or worse, but nobody prepared me for this. I did my best." "Your best?" I was getting louder now, and I didn't care. "Your best was leaving your dying wife alone while you went out drinking. Your best was making me handle all the funeral arrangements while you worried about your job." "You need to calm down," he said, glancing towards the living room where my sister and a few remaining friends were still talking quietly. "People will hear you." "I don't care who hears me." The words came out louder than I intended, and I saw him flinch. "That was my daughter, Kevin, my only child. And you treated her like she was an inconvenience in the last year of her life." "I didn't treat her like," he started, but I wasn't done. "Yes, you did. And now, on the day we buried her, you want to kick me out of the house I've been paying for so you can move on with your life." I made air quotes around his words, and I could see his face getting red. "This is my house now," he said, his voice getting harder. "I'm her husband. I inherited everything, and I want you gone." That's when I started laughing. I know it sounds crazy, laughing at a moment like that, but I couldn't help it. The sheer audacity of this man, the absolute nerve. "Your house?" I managed to get out between laughs that were starting to sound a little hysterical. "Your house?" "Yes, my house. Khloe's dead, which makes me the homeowner now, and I'm telling you to pack your stuff and get out." I stopped laughing abruptly. "Kevin, do you remember who bought this house? Do you remember whose name is on the deed?" For just a second, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face, but then his jaw set stubbornly. "That doesn't matter. I'm Khloe's husband. I'm her heir. Everything she had is mine now." "Everything she had, yes," I said quietly. "But she didn't have this house, Kevin." "I do." "That's not. You can't. he stammered, and I could see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to work out the legal implications. The house is in my name, I continued, feeling calmer now that I could see him starting to panic. I paid the down payment. My name is on the deed, the mortgage, the insurance, everything. Khloe and you lived here, but you never owned it. His face was going from red to purple now. You're lying. You're just trying to manipulate me because you're grieving. I'm not lying, and I'm not manipulating anyone. I walked over to the kitchen drawer where I kept important documents and pulled out a folder. Would you like to see the deed, the mortgage paperwork, the insurance documents? All in my name. He stared at the papers I was holding like they might bite him. This is some kind of trick. You can't just... You said the house would be ours eventually. I said we'd discuss transferring it once your credit improved, and you could qualify for your own mortgage, I corrected. But that was when I thought you were a decent man who loved my daughter. That was before I watched you abandon her when she needed you most. I didn't abandon her, he shouted, and now I knew the people in the living room could definitely hear us. I was working. I was trying to keep our life together. By going out drinking 3 nights a week, by playing golf every weekend while she was too weak to get out of bed, by not even being here when she died. I couldn't watch her. I couldn't, for a moment. His voice broke, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. You couldn't what, Kevin? You couldn't be a husband. You couldn't be there for the woman who loved you enough to marry you despite all the red flags? What red flags? He demanded. The bad credit, the job hopping, the way you always seemed to be looking for someone else to solve your problems, the way you moved into my house and started acting like you owned it from day one. He was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically see him trying to figure out his next move. Then his expression changed, became calculating in a way that made my skin crawl. Fine, he said quietly. Maybe the house is in your name, but I've been paying the mortgage for 3 years. I've put money into improvements, into maintenance. You owe me. I owe you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For what? For barely making the mortgage payments on time. For the cheap ceiling fan you installed in the bedroom. For the paint. Job you never finished in the bathroom. I've been living here, paying bills, treating this like my home. Because I let you, I interrupted. Because I thought you were going to be my son-in-law forever, and I wanted to help you and Khloe build a life together. But you know what? That was contingent on you actually being a decent human being. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him realizing that his usual charm and manipulation tactics weren't going to work here. That's when his mask finally slipped completely. You know what? He said, his voice turning cold. You're right. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up to watch my wife waste away and die. I didn't sign up to have my bitter old mother-in-law hovering around judging everything I do. And I sure as hell didn't sign up to pretend I'm devastated when, honestly, I'm relieved it's over. The silence that followed his words was deafening. Even the quiet conversation from the living room seemed to stop. Relieved? I whispered. Yeah, relieved. Do you have any idea what it's like watching someone you love turn into that? Do you know what it's like having your whole life revolve around doctor appointments and medications and watching someone suffer? I'm 29 years old, Margaret. I should be living my life, not playing nurse to a dying woman. I felt something inside me snap. All the grief, all the exhaustion, all the months of watching this man fail my daughter when she needed him most. It all came rushing out at once. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of my house. Right now. Pack your things and get out. He laughed, but it sounded forced. You can't kick me out. I live here. I have rights. You have no rights here, I said, my voice getting stronger. This is my house, and you are no longer welcome in it. You have 1 hour to pack whatever you can carry, and then I want you gone. You can't do this, he shouted. You can't just throw me out on the street. "Watch me." That's when he said it. The words that are burned into my memory forever. "I won't." "You gone now!" he screamed, his face twisted with rage. "This is my house and I want you out right now. Call the police if you want. They'll tell you that as Khloe's husband, I have more right to be here than you do." Well, guess what happened? Next, you're going to want to hear this part, because what I did surprised even me. I looked at Kevin standing there in my kitchen, red-faced and screaming about calling the police, and something inside me just clicked. You know that moment when you've been pushed too far, when someone has finally crossed a line you didn't even know existed? That was my moment. "You want me to call the police?" I said, reaching for my phone. "Okay, let's call the police." The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. "Wait, what are you— You said to call them," I interrupted, already dialing 911. "You said they'd tell me you have more rights to this house than I do, so let's find out." "Margaret, hold on, let's just— 911, what's your emergency?" The Aya dispatcher's voice was calm and professional. "Hi, I need an officer to come to my home," I said, keeping my eyes locked on Kevin's increasingly panicked face. "I have someone here who is refusing to leave my property, and I need them removed." Kevin was frantically waving his hands at me, mouthing, "Hang up," and looking like he was about to have a heart attack. "What's the address, ma'am?" I gave her the address while Kevin continued his silent panic dance in front of me. "And you said this person is refusing to leave? Are you in any immediate danger?" "No immediate danger, but he's been verbally aggressive and has refused my request for him to leave. He was my son-in-law, but he doesn't live here legally, and I want him removed from my property. Officers will be there within 15 minutes. Stay on the line if you feel unsafe." "Thank you. I'll be fine." I hung up and looked at Kevin, who was staring at me like I just announced I was an alien. "Are you insane?" he hissed, trying to keep his voice down now that he remembered we still had guests in the living room. "You can't call the cops on me." "I just did," I said calmly. "You told me to." "I didn't mean it literally. I was making a point." "What point was that, Kevin? The point where you think being my daughter's widower gives you legal rights to my house? The point where you think you can kick me out of my own home on the day we buried my child?" He started pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. "This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. You're grief-stricken. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months," I said. "Sit down, Kevin. We're going to wait right here for the police to arrive, and then we'll see who has rights to what." But instead of sitting down, he bolted. Just ran right out of the kitchen toward the front door. I heard him talking frantically to my sister and the remaining guests, telling them there had been a misunderstanding and they should probably head home. Within 5 minutes, the house was empty except for Kevin and me. He came back into the kitchen looking like a trapped animal. "Margaret, please," he said, and his whole demeanor had changed. Gone was the arrogant, demanding man from 10 minutes ago. Now he was all desperate pleading. "Please call them back and cancel. We can work this out. We're family." "Family?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Kevin, you just told me you were relieved my daughter is dead. You told me you want me out of my own house so you can move on with your life. That's not how family treats each other." I was upset. I said things I didn't mean. "No," I cut him off. "You said exactly what you meant. You just didn't expect there to be consequences." The doorbell rang and Kevin actually jumped. "Margaret, please, I'm begging you. You should have thought about that before you decided to show your true colors," I said, walking toward the front door. 2 officers stood on my porch, a woman who looked to be about my age and a younger man who reminded me a little of my late husband. Both were polite and professional. "Ma'am, we got a call about someone refusing to leave the property." "Yes, that's right. I'm Margaret. This is my house, and I need my son-in-law to leave. He's been asked to go, but he's refusing." They looked past me to where Kevin was hovering awkwardly in the hallway, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. "Sir, is this your residence?" the female officer asked. Well, it's complicated, Kevin started. I live here. I'm married to her daughter. Was married, I corrected. We buried my daughter today. And he doesn't live here legally. The house is in my name. The male officer looked confused. You live here, but it's not your house? Look, Kevin said, stepping forward with his hands up in a peacekeeping gesture. There's been a big misunderstanding. Margaret is understandably upset. We just had a funeral today. Emotions are running high. What's the misunderstanding? The female officer asked, looking between us. I asked him to leave my house, and he refused, I said simply. He told me to call the police because he thought they'd side with him. So I did. Both officers looked at Kevin expectantly. I pay the mortgage, he said weakly. I've been living here for 3 years. My wife just died and I'm grieving and she's trying to throw me out on the street. Do you have any legal documentation showing this is your residence? The female officer asked. Lease agreement, deed, mortgage in your name? Kevin's silence was all the answer they needed. Ma'am, do you have documentation showing this is your property? She asked me. Absolutely. Would you like to see it? I went back to the kitchen and grabbed the folder with all my house documents. The officers examined them carefully, while Kevin stood there looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Everything's in your name, the male officer confirmed. Deed, mortgage, insurance. How long has he been living here? About 3 years. He and my daughter lived here together, and I moved in about a year ago to help care for her when she got sick. The arrangement was always that this was my house, and they were welcome to live here. But now you want him to leave? I looked at Kevin, who was staring at me with a mixture of fear and what I can only describe as betrayal, as if I was the one, being unreasonable here. Yes, I said firmly. I want him to leave. Sir, this is her property, the female officer said to Kevin. She has the right to ask you to leave. Do you have somewhere else you can go? This is insane, Kevin exploded, his fake calm finally cracking completely. She can't just kick me out. I just lost my wife. I don't have anywhere else to go. That's not really our concern, the male officer said, though not unkindly. This isn't your legal residence. The property owner has asked you to leave. You need to gather your belongings and go. What about my stuff? I have 3 years' worth of belongings. In this house. You can take what you can reasonably carry today, the female officer said. If there are larger items, you'll need to coordinate with the property owner about retrieving them later. Kevin looked at me desperately. Margaret, you can't do this. Where am I supposed to go? You should have thought about that before you told me you were relieved my daughter was dead, I said quietly. Both officers looked sharply at Kevin, and I saw their expressions change. Whatever sympathy they might have had for his situation evaporated in that moment. You said that? The female officer asked, her voice considerably colder now. I was upset. I didn't mean... On the day of the funeral? The male officer pressed. Kevin's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. It's not... You don't understand the context. I think we understand enough, the female officer said. Ma'am, how long are you willing to give him to pack? 1 hour, I said. He can take his clothes and personal items. Everything else we can discuss later. You heard her, the male officer said to Kevin. 1 hour to pack what you can carry. We'll wait outside to make sure there are no problems. The officers headed back to their car. Kevin grabbed my arm. Margaret, please. I know I said terrible things, but I'm grieving too. I loved Khloe. No, I said, pulling away from him. You loved the idea of Khloe. You loved having a wife who took care of you and made you look good. But when she needed you to love her back, when she needed you to be there for her, you disappeared. That's not fair. You know what's not fair? I was getting loud again, and I didn't care. What's not fair is that my daughter spent the last year of her life wondering why her husband couldn't stand to be in the same room with her. What's not fair is that she died thinking maybe she wasn't worth fighting for. Tears were streaming down my face now. all the grief and anger I'd been holding back finally pouring out. She asked me once if I thought you still loved her, I continued. She was so weak she could barely sit up, and she was worried that she wasn't being a good enough wife to you. Can you imagine? She was dying, and she was worried about your feelings. Kevin was crying too now, but I wasn't sure if it was grief or self-pity. I did love her. I do love her. I couldn't handle watching her die. So you made me handle it alone, I said. You made her go through it feeling abandoned by the person who was supposed to love her most. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I know I failed her. I know I failed you both. For a moment, looking at him standing there broken and crying, I almost wavered. Almost. Then I remembered him, checking his phone during her diagnosis. I remembered him going out drinking while she was too weak to get out of bed. I remembered him not even being there when she took her last breath. Your hour starts now, I said, and walked away. I went into the living room and sat in my daughter's favorite chair, listening to Kevin moving around upstairs, opening drawers and closets. The officers had come back inside and were standing quietly by the front door, giving me space but making sure Kevin didn't try anything stupid. About halfway through the hour, Kevin came downstairs with 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. He stopped in the living room doorway and looked at me. I know you hate me right now, he said quietly, and maybe you have good reason to. But Khloe wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want us to part like this. I looked up at him, this man I'd welcomed into my family, this man I'd helped and supported and trusted with my daughter's heart. You're right, I said. Khloe wouldn't want this. She'd want me to forgive you and help you and make sure you were okay, because that's the kind of person she was. Too good, too generous, too willing to put other people's needs before her own. Kevin's face lit up with hope. But Khloe isn't here anymore, I continued, and I'm not her. I don't have her capacity for endless forgiveness. I don't have her ability to make excuses for people who hurt her. His face fell again. Where will you go? I asked, not because I really cared, but because some small part of me was still programmed to worry about other people's well-being. My buddy Jake said I could crash on his couch for a while, he mumbled. Until I figure things out, I nodded. Your hour's almost up. He stood there for another minute, like he was waiting for me to change my mind or offer some last-minute reprieve. When it didn't come, he picked up his bags and headed for the door. Margaret, he said, turning back one last time. I really am sorry. About Khloe. About everything. I know I can't fix what I did, but I am sorry. I know you are, I said. But being sorry doesn't undo the damage, and it doesn't mean there shouldn't be consequences. The officers escorted him out to his car, and I watched from the window as he loaded his bags into the back seat. He sat there for a few minutes before starting the engine, probably hoping I'd come running out to stop him. I didn't. After his car disappeared around the corner, the female officer came back to the door. You okay, ma'am? I will be, I said, and meant it. If he comes back and gives you any trouble, don't hesitate to call. We've got this incident documented, so we'll know the background if anything else happens. Thank you, both of you. I know this probably seemed like a family drama you didn't want to get involved in. She shook her head. Lady, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen plenty of people at their worst moments. What that man said to you today, on the day you buried your daughter, that's not grief talking, that's character. After they left, I walked through the house that was finally, truly mine again. It felt different somehow. Bigger, cleaner, like a weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. I went into Khloe's room, which I'd avoided since her death, and sat on her bed. Her favorite pillow still smelled like her shampoo. Her jewelry box was still sitting on the dresser, filled with the pieces I'd given her over the years for birthdays and graduations, and on her nightstand was a letter with my name on it in her handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened it. Mom, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for leaving you alone. I'm sorry for all the worry and heartache I've caused. I'm sorry that your life got turned upside down because of my illness. But mostly, I'm sorry about Kevin. I know you don't like him very much, and I know you've been trying to hide it for my sake. I'm not blind, Mom. I see how he treats you, how he treats this whole situation. I see how he checks out when things get hard. I married him because I thought I loved him, but if I'm being honest, I think I married him because I was afraid of being alone. After Dad died, I watched you struggle so hard to keep everything together, and I was terrified of ending up like that. What a joke, right? I ended up alone anyway, just in a different way. I want you to know that you don't owe Kevin anything after I'm gone. Not loyalty, not kindness, not a place to live. You've given enough to this family. You've sacrificed enough. The house is yours. It was always yours, and it should stay yours. Don't let him guilt you into thinking otherwise. I love you more than words can say. You've been the best mother anyone could ask for, and I'm so grateful for every sacrifice you made for me. But now it's time to live for yourself. Be happy, Mom, for both of us. All my love, Khloe P.S. There's something else I need to tell you about Kevin, but I'll save that for another letter. Check my jewelry box. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open the jewelry box. But there, underneath her high school class ring, was another envelope. This one was thicker, and when I opened it, photographs fell out. Pictures of Kevin with another woman. Recent pictures based on his haircut and the clothes I recognized. Pictures of them at restaurants, at bars, in what looked like a hotel room. The letter with the photos was shorter. Mom, I hired a private investigator, 3 months ago because I suspected Kevin was cheating. I was right. Her name is Ashley. She works at his company, and according to the investigator, they've been together for over a year. I never confronted him about it. What was the point? I was dying anyway, but I wanted you to know the truth about who he really is. Not because I want you to hate him, okay, maybe a little, but because I want you to understand that anything bad that happens to him after I'm gone is not your fault. He made his choices. Let him live with the consequences. I love you. Take care of yourself. Khloe. I sat there on my daughter's bed, surrounded by evidence of her husband's betrayal, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Not relief that she was gone. I would carry that grief forever, but relief that I didn't have to pretend anymore. Relief that I didn't have to make excuses for Kevin or try to see the good in him or worry about his feelings. Relief that my instincts had been right all along. Over the next few weeks, Kevin tried to contact me several times. He called, he texted. He even showed up at my work once trying to talk things through. I ignored the calls and texts, and hospital security handled his visit to my workplace. His story around town was that I'd had a grief-induced breakdown and kicked him out unfairly. Some people believed him. Kevin could be very charming when he wanted to be. But others remembered how absent he'd been during Khloe's illness, how I'd been the one at every doctor's appointment and every hospital visit. The truth has a way of coming out eventually. About a month after I kicked him out, Kevin's girlfriend Ashley called me. Apparently, she'd had no idea he was married when they started their relationship. He'd told her he was divorced. When she found out the truth, that he'd been cheating on his dying wife, she ended things immediately. She also felt terrible about unknowingly participating in his betrayal of Khloe. I just wanted you to know, she said during our awkward phone conversation, that I never would have gotten involved with him if I'd known, and I'm so sorry for your loss. I thanked her for calling and told her she wasn't responsible for Kevin's lies. She seemed like a decent person who'd been manipulated just like the rest of us. Kevin, meanwhile, was discovering that his charming personality could only carry him so far. Jake got tired of him sleeping on his couch after a few weeks, especially once Kevin started bringing home different women every few nights. His job performance started slipping without Khloe and me handling all the household responsibilities. he'd been ignoring. He got written up twice for being late and once for coming in hungover. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was telling people I owed him money for improvements he'd made to his house. When word got back to me about the specific improvements he was claiming credit for, I actually laughed out loud. The new kitchen faucet that I'd installed and paid for? Kevin's work, apparently. The bathroom renovation that I'd hired contractors to do while Khloe was in the hospital. All Kevin. The landscaping that I'd done myself during my time off work? Kevin's vision and labor. It was almost impressive how thoroughly he'd rewritten history in his own mind. But here's the thing about lies. They catch up to you eventually. About 3 months after I kicked him out, Kevin showed up at my door again. But this time, he looked different. Thinner, shaggier, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of too many late nights and not enough real sleep. "Margaret," he said when I opened the door, "I need to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about, Kevin. Please, just 5 minutes. I'm in trouble." Against my better judgment, I let him into the living room. I didn't offer him a seat, or a drink, or any of the basic courtesies I'd once extended automatically. "What kind of trouble?" I asked. "Financial trouble. I can't make rent on my apartment, my credit cards are maxed out, and I'm about to lose my job." I waited for him to continue, but he just sat there looking at me expectantly. And I prompted, "I was wondering if maybe we could work something out. About the house. You said I could come get my things, but we never really talked about compensation for the money I put into the place." There it was. I've been waiting for this conversation. "What money did you put into the place, Kevin?" "Well, I paid the mortgage for 3 years. You paid rent," I interrupted. "You lived in my house and contributed to the household expenses. That's not the same thing as investing in property." "But I thought of it as my home. I made improvements." "What improvements?" I asked. "Be specific." He started listing things, and I realized he was claiming credit for literally every single thing that had been done to the house in the past 3 years, including things that had been done before he'd even moved in. "Kevin," I said when he finished. "His list? Do you have receipts for any of this work? Contracts? Proof of payment?" "Well, no, but..." "Then how exactly do you expect me to compensate you for work you can't prove you did, much less work you can't prove you paid for?" His face was getting red again, the same way it had the day of the funeral. "You know I did those things. You were here, you saw me working on the house. I saw you install one ceiling fan and start a paint job in the bathroom that you never..." "Finished," I said calmly. "I also saw me pay contractors to redo the kitchen, hire landscapers to fix the yard, and personally paint every other room in this house. That's not..." "You're exaggerating." "Am I?" I went to my desk and pulled out a folder I'd been keeping since the day I kicked him out. "Because I have receipts for everything, Kevin. Every contractor payment, every Home Depot purchase, every landscaping bill. Would you like to see them?" The folder was thick with documentation, and I could see Kevin's confidence crumbling as he realized how thoroughly I'd covered my bases. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "I lived here for 3 years. I contributed to this household." "Yes, you did. You paid your share of utilities and groceries. You occasionally helped with yard work when I asked you directly. You installed a ceiling fan." I pulled out a calculator and a legal pad. "Let's see. 3 years of mortgage payments at $1,247 a month. That's $66,490 in mortgage payments. You contributed approximately half of that. So let's say $33,246. Kevin perked up, thinking I was about to hand him a check. "Now," I continued, "let's talk about what fair market rent would have been for a 4-bedroom house in this neighborhood. According to current listings, comparable houses rent for about $20,800 a month." I could see him starting to do the math. In his head, 3 years at $2,800 a month would be $100,800 in rent. Minus the $33,146 you contributed to the mortgage, you actually owe me $67,554 in back rent. The color drained from his face completely. But wait, there's more, I said, feeling oddly cheerful about this conversation for the first time. You also lived here rent-free for the year I was taking care of Khloe. That's another $33,600 you owe me. This is insane, he whispered. Oh, I'm not done. Let's factor in the utilities you didn't pay, the food you ate that I bought, the improvements to the house that you're now claiming credit for. I scribbled numbers on the legal pad, making sure he could see every calculation. By my math, Kevin, you owe me approximately $127. Should I send you a bill? He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. You want to play the game where we calculate who owes whom money? Let's play that game properly. I can't pay you $127,000. I don't have that kind of money. Then, I guess it's a good thing I'm not actually planning to pursue it, I said, closing the folder. Unlike you, I'm not trying to squeeze money out of family members during their time of grief. He sat there in stunned silence for several minutes. Margaret, he finally said, I know I screwed up. I know I wasn't the husband Khloe deserved. But I'm drowning here. I lost my job yesterday and I don't know what I'm going to do. For just a moment I felt that old familiar tug of sympathy, the ingrained need to help, to fix, to take care of people who couldn't take care of themselves. Then I remembered my daughter's letters. I remembered her telling me it was time to live for myself. I'm sorry you're struggling, Kevin, I said, and I meant it. But your problems are not my responsibility anymore. Please, I'm not asking for money. Maybe I could rent a room here, just until I get back on my feet. I actually laughed. You want to rent a room in the house you tried to kick me out of. I was upset that day. I said things I didn't mean. You meant every word, I said firmly. And even if you didn't, even if you were just grief-stricken and not thinking clearly, the answer is no. This is my home, my sanctuary, my place to heal from losing my daughter. You are not welcome here. He tried a few more approaches, guilt, manipulation, fake tears. But I'd learned to recognize all his tricks over the past few months. Finally, he played his last card. What would Khloe want? He asked. If she could see us now, fighting like this, what would she want? I walked over to the mantelpiece where I'd framed one of my favorite pictures of Khloe. Her graduation from college, bright and hopeful and beautiful. I know exactly what Khloe would want, I said, touching the frame gently. She told me in a letter she left for me. I went upstairs and came back with Khloe's letters and the photos of Kevin with Ashley. I handed them to him without a word. Watching. Him read those letters was like watching a man realize he'd been sentenced to death. His hands shook, his face went white, and when he got to the photos he actually made a choking sound. She knew, he whispered. She knew, I confirmed. She knew you were cheating on her while she was dying. She knew you were planning to move on with your life before she was even gone. And she still tried to protect your secret because she didn't want to cause drama in her final months. He was crying now. Ugly sobs that shook his whole body. She was better than both of us deserved, I continued. But she's gone now, and I don't have her capacity for endless forgiveness. I don't have her need to protect people who hurt her. I loved her, he sobbed. I did love her, I was scared, and I made terrible choices. Yes, you did. And now you have to live with the consequences of those choices. I took the letters and photos back from him and walked to the front door. Goodbye, Kevin, I said, opening it. I won't be seeing you again. He stood up slowly like an old man and walked toward the door. Margaret, he said one last time, I really am sorry. For all of it. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't fix anything. And it doesn't entitle you to forgiveness. He walked out of my house and out of my life. That was 8 months ago. I heard through the grapevine that Kevin eventually moved back in with his parents in another state. He's working at a call center and living in their basement, according to mutual acquaintances who still keep in touch with him. Ashley, the woman he was cheating with, actually reached out to me again a few months later. She'd started a support group for people who'd been unknowingly involved with cheaters, and she wanted to know if I'd be willing to speak to other families who'd been affected by infidelity. I declined, but I appreciated the gesture. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever expected to be. I kept the house, obviously. It's mine, bought and paid for, with my own money and my own sacrifices. I've redecorated Khloe's room into a craft space where I make quilts for the children's hospital, where I work. It felt good to turn that space of sadness into something creative and helpful. I've started dating again, which surprised everyone, including me. Nothing serious yet, but it's nice to remember that I'm still a woman with my own wants and needs, not just a mother and a caregiver. I've also started traveling, something I always wanted to do but never had the time or money for when I was putting Khloe through school and then caring for her during her illness. Last month I went to Ireland, something Khloe and I had always talked about doing together someday. I scattered some of her ashes on the cliffs of Moher, and it felt like keeping a promise. The biggest change, though, is in how I think about myself and my relationships with other people. For so many years, I was the person everyone came to when they needed help. I was the fixer, the caretaker, the one who put everyone else's needs first. Khloe's death and Kevin's betrayal taught me that being endlessly giving doesn't always bring out the best in people. Sometimes it enables their worst impulses. Sometimes it teaches them to take advantage of your kindness instead of appreciating it. I'm still a caring person. I still help others when they need it, but I've learned to set boundaries, to say no, to put my own well-being first when necessary. Some people in my life have struggled with this change. They're used to the old Margaret, the one who would sacrifice anything for anyone. They don't know what to do with this new version who considers her own needs equally important. But you know what? That's their problem to figure out, not mine. Think about Khloe every day. I miss her voice, her laugh, the way she used to call me just to tell me about something funny that happened at work. I miss the future we'll never have together. The grandchildren I'll never spoil, the mother-daughter trips we'll never take, the quiet evenings we'll never spend just talking. But I don't regret kicking Kevin out. I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret choosing my own well-being over his convenience. Khloe was right in her letter. I had given enough. I had sacrificed enough. It was time to live for myself, and for the first time in my adult life, that's exactly what I'm doing. So to anyone out there who's been taken advantage of by someone they trusted, who's been treated poorly by someone they helped, who's been made to feel guilty for setting boundaries, let me tell you something. You don't owe anyone your peace of mind. You don't owe anyone a place in your life if they're not adding value to it. And you certainly don't owe anyone forgiveness just because they're sorry they got caught. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for them is to let them face the consequences of their actions. Sometimes love means saying no, and sometimes the best way to honor someone's memory is to learn from their example of what not to accept in your own life. Kevin taught me what I won't tolerate. Khloe taught me what I deserve. I'm finally old enough and wise enough to listen to both lessons.